Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weekly overlook. Today I'll be covering the weather for May 7th of 2023, as well as weather for the rest of this week. For today we do have an enhanced risk for much of the area that was affected by the slight risk the day before, as well as a very large slight risk around extending all the way west to the border of Colorado, and all the way south is to the border of southern border of Tennessee. So we have a big area to cover, as well as a slight risk for parts of central, mostly western Texas, as well as a pretty large marginal threat for much of Texas around that. Um, if we look at the threat risk for today, we do have a 5% for much of Iowa and northern Missouri and eastern Nebraska. Uh, and for the rest of the threats, we got a 30% um, with a hatched significant threat for damaging winds, as well as 15% with a hatched significant threat for what looks like to be southern Oklahoma and central Texas, as well as a large 15% for much of that slight risk area. If you take a look at hail, it's pretty much the same, with another hatched significant 15%, as well as another very large hatched significant threat with a 30% for mostly Iowa and Nebraska. Not really much of Missouri, but there will definitely be hail in Missouri, as well as much of this area. Um, if we go to the pivotal weather models, we can see that the jet stream is continuing along most of the across most of the Midwest, and impacting the area that was impacted yesterday with mid-level jet to really trigger that severe weather today. And if we take a look at the shortwave trough that is currently moving through the area, we can see that it is the severe weather for today is just barely getting the back end of that shortwave trough there, to trigger the severe weather. So it's at the very rear end of that shortwave trough, so it may not be really as severe as what we're seeing yesterday. But let's go into a more zoomed in view here of that region. If we take a look at the instability, um, which is here, if we take a look at that instability, we can see still large amounts of instability, but it definitely looks to be more localized than more widespread into this band, really, than what we were seeing yesterday, where it was pretty much the entirety of this area. It's now very localized, with simulated values of it, like of 500 and above. There's probably even simulated values of 6,000. I don't think we're actually going to see 6,000 or really high 5,000s today. I think that maybe just a little bit of contamination, but in this area you would expect really large amounts of instability, as well as large amounts of instability across much of this area, to fuel the potential for very large hail. And back through the Midwest, through Kansas and Missouri. But let's take a look at the lapse rates here. So we have pretty decent lapse rates for pretty high lapse rates that are moving through much of the area from the west. That is mixing up a lot of that instability, as well as humidity. We have lots of humidity throughout this area. If I switch to humidity here, you can see I've just tons of humidity, including where there was that very large peak of instability, dew points in the 70s, as well as dew points in the upper 60s throughout much of that area. And as well as the big or large lapse rates to really mix up the atmosphere and get it ready for severe weather. Um, But if we take a look at the surface cape, uh, this might be one of the main reasons why we may not see uh, that big of a, well, this is a new run. So when I was looking at it earlier and creating a forecast earlier, the surface cape was not, it was really not that extreme as it is now, but it is mainly localized to this area. So in that 5% region. So where there's these extreme amounts of surface cape to let those surface air parcels rise and form an updraft. That's where we're going to see in that 5% area. Let's actually get a refresher on where that 5% area is. It's a little odd because that 5% area is isolated to mostly this area, which is off from the Illinois area where there's tons of instability, but there may be a cause for that. If we take a look at the wind shear here, uh, you can see that the wind shear is increasing a lot through much of the area. This is Monday, so actually, yeah, okay. So this is Monday into Sunday. This is leftover wind shear from the day prior, and then this is the QLC S that was formed from severe weather the day prior that is organized and bring the potential for hail and damaging winds. Not really much of a tornado threat through Kentucky, through much of this area that's going to be affected, as well as a rain threat. But by the time it reaches the Tennessee border, that instability really fades away, as well as the wind shear here. It really fades away by the time it gets down to Tennessee, likely making tornadoes very unlikely with that QLCS. But for the severe weather for today, you can see very localized, strong wind shear that is likely not going to be really affecting the tornado potential at all because it's right behind that area. But it might. But in front of that area where the tornadoes could have embedded tornadoes could develop, it's likely we're looking at wind shear in the 30 knots and 40 knots, where the mostly in this area, as we were seeing, could have the potential for tornadoes. At least that's what I'm seeing. I really don't think that 5%. I mean, they could be going off of the wind shear models here, how there was a strong wind shear there, and that could be affecting the tornado potential a ton, which it very could well be. But I would think that if there were going to be embedded tornadoes to form, I don't think they're going to be forming out the back end and more along the front, where the wind shear is around 30 knots. And where that instability, where that high amounts of instability was in that area. So it looks like, to me, it looks like much of this area has the greatest tornado potential for today. Where that we saw the large amounts of instability on both the surface and across the spectrum, as well as the most of the wind shear. Um, and the wind shear that's not on the back end of the QLCS, but the wind shear on the back of the QLCS could definitely be affecting the tornado potential, and why there's a large 5% for much of that area, where the wind shear is reaching like 80 knots on the models. Um, but let's take a look at the significant tornado parameter just to tie it all together. It's not really something that you want to look at for all this. What you're seeing down here is left over from the day prior. But again, you don't really want to look at a significant tornado parameter to get your best idea of where you think tornado is going to develop, because you want to look at the variety of different things, the wind shear, the humidity, the instability, the surface instability, and you don't really want to rely on significant tornado parameter for your if you're out chasing. But you can see mainly in Missouri where it's saying that there is the most likely chance of tornadoes. But again, the entire QLCS, in front of the entire QLCS that is expected to make its way south through this area, is likely to have the potential for tornadoes. Um, and the potential for very large hail, as there was large amounts of cape, um, and also very damaging winds. Let's go back to our composite reflectivity. We can see that if we go to where that QLCS is moving through the area, you can see this line segment here. You can see very intense reflectivity along the front there, where there's going to be the potential for very heavy rain and also very large hail, potentially gorilla hail, and also very damaging winds expected along that front there. You saw that we did have that that what is it? We did have the threat, the 30% risk. That's what I'm trying to say on the SPC outlook, and that is expected to continue by Monday. And yeah, so let's go into a more zoomed out view here. Um, to get actually no, I still have one more region to cover. I didn't cover the Texas slight risk yet. Okay, so we do have on the models, storms are already firing up along that area there. Or it could be these storms that are firing up on the models in the very late afternoon into Monday. But I mean, it could be either or. I'm gonna stick with this because it seems like it could be more of this. Uh, if we go to the wind dynamics here, let's take a look at the wind dynamics. You can see that we actually first let's take a look at the the humidity here. Um, you can see large amounts of humidity across much of western Texas and up through the Midwest, as well as a very strong dry line. Okay, this is likely from the day prior. Those storms you were seeing were likely from the day prior. So let's look at the Monday systems. You can see a very intense dry line, mostly in this area where it's very intense dry line to trigger severe weather from the subtle forcing that is pushing up against the very subtle forcing from the upper level winds. There's not a shortwave trough moving through the area. At least that's not what I saw when I was looking at the models earlier. Yeah, there's not a shortwave trough moving through the area. It's just very subtle forcing from the jet stream up here that is pushing up against the moisture here to develop it into a dry line and trigger the severe weather. If we take a look at the instability here, we can see that all that instability is what's left over from the day prior. Very huge amounts of instability, very large amounts of instability. Let's take a look at some of the generated SQTs from the day from yesterday. Just as a little, just as something fun, we have huge amounts of instability here, like in the 7,000s, as well as large amounts of surface instability from the day prior. So that is really something. But for today, we do have still large amounts of humidity, not so much as what we saw just earlier, but still large amounts of instability along that dry line in the 3,000s and localized 4,000s in some areas that could allow for the potential of very large hail as well as damaging winds. If we take a look at the surface cape here, if we go to today, you can see that where there's storms developing, there's pretty much an absence of surface instability. So that it could be really affecting why there's not really much of a tornado potential down south on the SPC outlook. But if we take a look at it does look mostly outflow based. But if we do take a look at the shear here, we can see that there is shear left over from yesterday, and then it fades away, and then comes back in much of that area. But you can see it's kind of hard to tell because it's like all over the place. But It does look like there could be a little bit of shear in some areas, as well as the lack of surface instability for this area could be really affecting why there's not really much of a tornado potential, um, because it's below. There's not really a lot of instability underneath the systems to allow for a strong updraft. It's mainly outflow dominant, so that could be affecting why there is a lot. There's not really much of a tornado potential, but there is still the potential for very large hail and the potential for damaging winds through Texas. But let's go out into a more zoomed out view so I can cover the weather for the rest of the week. Let's also so let's look at Monday. Let's go to actually a more zoomed in view here, where we have the leftover systems from the day prior. We do have the thing is expect. What am I trying to say here? The jet stream is expected to dip down a little bit here, with that with the QLCS from yesterday, and let's take a look at that shortwave that was moving through the area. It does appear that uh, it is dipping down through. The jet stream is dipping down through the Ohio Valley and potentially affecting northern Tennessee. But let's take a look at the. Let's actually look at what's going on here. Let's go to the composite reflectivity, and we have that QLCS, and then we have the storm development for today, and then we have that QLCS right here that is developing along that area. We did see that there was very moderate to very moderate to high amounts of instability along that boundary there, but it does dissipate. This QLCS does dissipate by the time it reaches the Tennessee border, but still by Monday and the rest of Monday, while it's trying to make its way down, you see that very intense reflectivity, and we did see the large amounts of CAPE, but the lack of when I was looking at it earlier, it did have a lack of strong surface instability, and it still does. Very small amounts of very weak to moderate amounts of surface instability to allow for strong updraft to develop and rotate that wind shear, which I think is present. If we saw if let's go back just to be sure, to make sure that there is that wind shear present, but it's likely not really to affect much of the yeah it the strongest tornado potential for tomorrow is likely to be in this area where we did have all right where we sorry about that, where we did have the the wind shear, the more intense wind shear over mostly isolated to Mississippi, that begins to decrease the further west or further east you go, um, and potentially and affecting the tornado potential, mainly isolating it to just this area in particular. Um, where there was the very weak surface cape that could be sufficient enough for tornadic development, but it's likely to go, the tornado potential again is likely to be very small, as well as just the potential for very large hail and and damaging winds along that boundary there. That is a very hefty boundary, so I would not be surprised if there was very strong winds along that boundary, as well as the potential for very large hail. But let's go out into a more zoomed out view here, so I can look at weather for the rest of the week, and let's also go to GSF so I can actually cover weather for the rest of the week. Um, let's go to the upper wind dynamics. Let's take a look at the jet stream that's going to be moving across the United States much of this week. So we do have by Monday. I'm gonna chop it up into days. I just covered Monday, so let's go to Tuesday. Uh, Actually, yeah, we do have jet streams move. We do have the jet stream moving across much of the area. Let's take a look at our short waves here. Let's go to Tuesday. We do have um, we do have that shortwave that is moving through the area that was over here is now down here, continuing along, and mainly just the I think the main threat for today is mostly going to be the leftover threat or the leftover rain and whatever is left over from the day prior on Tuesday. That's mainly going to be our threat for Tuesday, mainly in this area. Um, Mainly, yeah. So that's mainly going to be our threat for Tuesday, just the leftover convection. But then let's go to Wednesday here. So we do have development, lots of development along this area here on Wednesday. Let's go to the short way. Let's go to the jet stream here, just to see what's going on, get a clear view of what could be causing that development there. There's nothing really for the low levels. Let's take a look, or I mean upper levels, but let's take a look at the low levels, see if there's any shortwave trough moving through the area by Wednesday. By Wednesday, it does look like there is a very subtle forcing from that actually, before I get on about that, what could be causing that severe weather is this very deep low pressure system here with this very strong trough that is negatively tilted. So the further west it goes, it is expected to draw tons of moisture out of the southern United States up north as it continues westward. But then, so we have that very strong trough as well as the very subtle forcing from on the low levels and the upper levels too. Very subtle forcing as that trough for the area across the Midwest on Wednesday. So let's take a look at our dew points here. If we take a look at our dew points, um, hold on, where? Okay, sorry, I'm having a little trouble. Let's look at our dew points here. So today I mean on Wednesday, we do have what looks like a developing dry line from that very subtle forcing. Mainly on Thursday, we have that dry line become really prominent. In that short wave that moves through the area is likely to trigger the severe weather along that very intense dry line there that it extends through much of the Midwest, all the way from Nebraska, all the way down to what looks like the southern border of Texas and continues into Mexico, all the way down. Very long dry line there from the very deep low pressure system that is moving through the area um, with that shortwave trough that is going to be triggering the severe weather. But let's take a look at our laps, or not laps race. Let's take a look at our cape here, so we can get an idea of what our hazards could be on Wednesday, because we do have that that dry line to trigger the severe weather. On Wednesday, it does look like very moderate instability is throughout much of the area, so there could be the potential for hail. It's very moderate instability though, so the potential for very large hail, probably not gorilla hail. But then let's take a look at our. I can't look at our surface cape, so I'm going to have to guess based on the wind shear as well as the rest of the cape. There could be the potential for tornadoes, as that shortwave trough does move through the area on Wednesday. You can see by Wednesday and Thursday, mainly Wednesday is when our severe thunderstorms are going to be firing up along that dry line with very strong or very decent, very strong wind shear to allow for rotating supercells to develop, as well as that moderate cape and the potential for hail and damaging winds with any isolated. I think it's going to be mostly isolated because there's no boundary uh, is going to be moving through the area. But let's go on to Thursday here. Let's switch over to our composite reflectivity, so we can get a better view of when and how storms are going to be developing on Thursday. So we see that storms start off mainly on Thursday when we saw that wind shear move through the area, and that long wave trough or short wave trough move through the area to trigger the severe weather. Then let's go to Friday. We do have, or by that time, that low pressure system does move through the area. That very strong low pressure system with that flanking shortwave. It is negatively tilted, so it is expected again to draw tons of moisture up north, as well as bringing tons of rain towards much of the northern United States, and but by Thursday, mainly is going to be when the severe weather develops, and then by Friday, not really much of anything, just the leftovers from yesterday continuing eastward throughout the eastern United States. But then let's look at our by Saturday. It looks like a bunch of tons of severe weather develops again along that boundary there. Let's look at what could be causing that. Let's look at our dew points here. Let's see if that dry line is still persisting here. If we continue on to Friday and Saturday, we do see by Friday that dry line, and Saturday that dry line still persists, but it does look like it is starting to fall apart a little bit, continuing into Friday and Saturday. So severe weather may not be as prominent as Wednesday and Thursday, but still possible. Um, but let's take a look at our cape here. Let's take a look at our cape so we can get an idea of the hazards for this event. On Friday into Saturday, we do have lots more instability in the area than what we were seeing the day prior. That could lead to the potential for larger hail and potentially maybe even gorilla hail throughout the area. Again, I do want to note that I am looking at much later models in the on pivotal weather, so they are subject to change and could potentially be different, or they could happen earlier or happen later. So I will keep you guys updated with the daily forecast as they continue. But on Friday we do have much more cape, and you see tons of instability, very moderate instability, tons of moderate instability being drawn all the way up north to areas of North Dakota here by that very deep low pressure system that is negatively tilted and drawing all that instability up north. So we do have lots of instability and humidity being drawn up north to fuel that severe weather. But then let's take a look at our lapse rates here. Let's so On Wednesday and Thursday, on Thursday mainly, or on Thursday, we don't really have a lot of lapse rates to continue. We don't have a strong lapse rates to continue the convection in that area, but on Wednesday we do have very strong lapse rates to mix up to create a very well mixed layer. But on Thursday we don't, so that's mainly the reason why we're not going to have persisting severe weather on Thursday, mainly just the remnants. But then let's take a look at Friday here. We do have the strong lapse rates that continue eastward to really mix up that layer, mix up the humidity, mix up the instability, and get the atmosphere mixed up and ready for severe weather to continue into Saturday. But then on Saturday, it does begin to fizzle out a little bit more, and the lack of lapse rates is potentially going to cause a decrease in severe weather across much of the Midwest. as well as the decrease in instability by next week, or yeah, by next week. Um, uh, so the hazards for, or let's look at one more thing before I can definitely say what the hazards are going to be. We do have, you can see that low pressure system here with that strong wind shear along that boundary, or along that trough there, that does continue eastward. So we do have by Thursday and then into Saturday, we do have a little bit of lingering leftover wind shear to help for the potential of the possibility of tornadoes, as well as very as large hail, as we did see those the large amounts of instability and the wind shear to potentially allow for tornadoes to develop, as well as damaging winds. So that's mainly what we're looking at for this week. So now that I've told you the weather, please go down in the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator. And hopefully, I will be back tomorrow with another forecast.